You're listening to episode number 12 of the Wellness Real Estate Podcast. Today, I have solar expert Van Parseghian from Delta Solar Electric on the show. Van has been helping thousands of clients in the San Diego area for over 13 years and has earned a reputation for being one of the best solar consultants in the area. In this episode, he gives us so many insightful tips on how to save our clients money on their energy bills even before they get solar, so they in turn can save money on their solar system or PV panels that they need to buy to cover their usage. He also explains why many of his clients don't even need backup batteries. Why does he do this? Because he's obsessed with energy savings and he believes that passing the savings on to his clients is the right thing to do. He also shares his favorite new appliance that saves so much energy that not everyone knows about. If you've ever had anyone ask you about solar or energy savings and you weren't quite sure how to best answer their specific questions, or maybe you just want to learn how you too can save money on your utility bills, you won't want to miss this episode. Let's grow. Welcome to the Real Estate Marketing Podcast, where we explore a unique strategy no one is talking about that will enable you to engage more people with authentic conversations about your business more often. And it's called Wellness Real Estate. Not sure what that is or how it can help you as an agent? Well, that's what this podcast is all about. In fact, wellness real estate is growing so rapidly that it is projected to be nearly $870 billion by 2027. I'm Sheila Alston, and I'm your host. I'm also the founder of Healthy Home Media, where I help agents all over the country leverage this new trend in the industry to spark new conversations that will get people to listen to you and notice your brand. So if you're tired of spinning your wheels without any leads or sales to show for it, then stay tuned. I guarantee this podcast is not like any you've heard before. Welcome to the Wellness Real Estate Podcast. Welcome, Van.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Nice to see you today.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're here. So if you have a client who's interested in solar, maybe they don't have a solar system right now, what are your first steps that you suggest that they take?
The first thing we do is review their current usage, and we look for ways that we can save before we start producing energy with solar, because saving energy is a much better return on investment than investing in solar panels that you may not need. So we go with the assumption that all energy is lost in heat. And with that in mind, there's certain devices that will use a lot of energy, but there's other devices that are not necessarily designed to heat things, like, for example, lighting. And in that case, we can save, for example, 90% of energy used for lighting by just switching to LED lighting.
So that really does make a big difference. I think sometimes people think, really, is changing the light bulbs really going to matter? Because the light bulbs are more expensive, but it sounds like it does. If you were to change the light bulbs in your whole house, it can certainly reduce the overall energy bill.
Absolutely. And a lot of people will tell me, oh, I'll just wait till they burn out and then I'll replace them. That's not the right strategy, because they'll actually pay for themselves in a year or less. So even though they're more expensive, so for example, a typical 60-watt light bulb uses 60 watts to get the lighting. However, with an LED, it can use about 6 watts and get exactly the same function. So it's really important to not only change the light bulbs that you see, but even the ones you don't even notice. For example, in garage door openers, in closets, outdoor lighting, because it does take some time to do that, to get the right lights, because there's different kelvins. So some look, more daylight versus soft and warm, but it does take a little time, but it's definitely worth the investment to start with lighting. And then you don't need to switch off. The other thing is, people say, well, I go around the house and switch off lights for my wife or my kids or my husband, leave them on all the time. With LEDs, believe it or not, you really don't even need to switch them off because they're that efficient.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. And I know that the barrier for me for a long time was just they didn't have the different light colors. And I didn't want, fluorescent lighting or that white light everywhere. I kind of like the soft white a little bit better. And now they have all the different Kelvin frequency. You can get them to be very yellow or just like the soft white or even the daylight, which is really great.
Yeah, it's a little bit of time to do that. And sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error, to be honest with you, but it is definitely worth the investment. Again, a quick return, 1 year return is just incredible, better than, for example, even solar, which is a, 5 to 7 year return on your investment. So investing money in LED lighting is a no-brainer and the first thing anyone should do. And then continuing with that, the other area is landscape lighting. not to be overlooked, because landscape lighting is actually low voltage, which sounds great, low voltage. I don't use a lot of electricity,
Yeah.
but believe it or not, it's the opposite. The lower the voltage, the higher the wattage consumption. So there's a lot of losses there. There's a transformer. And the other
Really?
thing with LED
I
lighting,
I'm sorry, I had no idea about that because we had a lot of landscape lighting in our last house and our energy bills were always up and I was turning off all the lights and I and I feel like, why is our bill still so much? Maybe it was the landscape lighting. Wow.
and not only that, how many hours are your landscape lights on? They're on all the time. So they might be on for 12 hours. I mean, I have people that, don't even live in their house sometimes for a few months because they go to a vacation home. They say, why is my bill still so high? Well, it's because their landscape lighting was on a timer.
Oh, and why is it that the lower the watt, the higher the energy consumption?
Well, without getting into too much of Ohm's law and so forth,
Yeah.
the reason that we have a higher voltage, for example, it's obviously more dangerous to have 110 volts or 240 volts in your house because you can get shocked. With 12 volts, you don't get shocked. But the reason we go with higher voltage and power lines or 40,000 volts is just simple physics, and that the energy loss is related to the current and not the voltage, and the voltage is inversely proportional to the current. So the
Mm.
higher the voltage, the less current we can have, and the less current, the less loss.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's really interesting. So then how, if someone has a big lawn or lots of landscape lighting, how do they reduce that consumption? You're saying putting in
Put it in LED, it's as simple as
LED.
LED lights.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, again, it's the same thing. It takes a little time to do that, but they're completely interchangeable. Sometimes you can change out just the halogen bulb,
Mhm.
or sometimes buy a new fixture. But once again, it's absolutely a no-brainer that it pays for itself. I mean, the minute I drive up to a home and they say, oh, my electric bill's $1,000, can you help me, can you help me, I drive up and I start seeing the landscape light, and I see the incandescent candle bulbs on their porch light. I sometimes see even lights that are on outside that are 100-watt floodlights that are on and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So then what's the next step after LED lights?
So the other thing is refrigerators and freezers use a lot of electricity because obviously they're running all the time.
Mhm.
But obviously we need that, in order to eat. But a lot of times, for example, someone will buy a new refrigerator, and what do they do with the old one? They put it in the garage. Now that could be a 20-year-old refrigerator that's
Oh.
on its last leg. So, motor's not working very well as the older refrigerators had very poor insulation. And so that's why they're not as efficient as today's refrigerators. So I always recommend, if you get a new refrigerator, dispose of the old one. And if you want to put one in your garage, just buy a simple Energy Star. You don't need to spend a lot of money, but $500 or $600. Again, it's a good return on investment to buy an Energy Star versus that old side-by-side, French door refrigerator that you got rid of, that was, that your bill went down when you replaced it, but now you stick it in your garage, and guess what? You just destroyed that great new refrigerator's energy efficiency.
Right. You just added another refrigerator instead of reducing anything. That's
Exactly.
yeah.
So I really, see that in the garage a lot.
Okay.
The other things I'll just quickly go through is, Energy Star appliances are key.
Mhm.
While we're on appliances, dishwasher, the older and lower cost dishwashers, you may notice a heating iron inside it, which dries the dishes. The problem with that is that uses a lot of consumption to get that heat. But newer and Energy Star dishwashers, and I have an older Bosch dishwasher, it's about 20 years old, but it had this technology way back then where it actually uses the hot water to heat metal surrounding it. And so it stores that heat, and then that actually is used to dry the dishes. So it doesn't use any electricity to dry the dishes. So Energy Star appliances all around. The other ones I'll just quickly go through is a hot water circulating pump, which is great to get instant hot water, but that needs to make sure that that's on a timer. In
Mhm.
fact, the house I just looked at that someone purchased, the timer, there was a timer there, but it was switched to on all the time.
Yeah.
The
And
other
that
thing are
people don't
fountains.
realize that that means that your hot water is circulating through your house 24 hours a day. And that can be a huge energy consumption something, right? Because even if you just turned it off at night while you're sleeping, you're saving 8 hours of energy right there.
Correct. It's the duration of it. Although the pump doesn't consume a lot of energy, as you mentioned, Sheila, it'll just keep going whether you use it or not, whether you take a shower or not. So you want to make sure if you have a hot water pump, that's on a timer, as well as fountains. So outdoor fountains, another good investment to put them on timers, because who cares if the fountain's running at 3 o'clock in the morning? Hopefully no one's going to show up at your house that time to enjoy the
Yeah,
sound of the fountain.
right.
But that's another one. Another one that I always run into is portable hot tubs, because they have electric heating elements, so that will use a lot of electricity. And if you can avoid using that during the winter months, that would help. As well as if you have a swimming pool, use a variable speed pump and make sure your pool guy or gal sets it on a low speed setting.
Okay. All right. Those are really good tips. Let's talk about the hot water heaters, because I remember in our last conversation we were talking about a really cool one that uses even less energy, and so that you don't have to use the recirculating pump. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So the basics of hot water heaters, I mean, typically we have water heaters with tanks, and typically they're gas. Now there's electric water heaters, which are going to use more electricity, and sometimes you don't have an option if you don't have natural gas in your house. But if the most common ones are gas water heaters or tankless water heaters. And there's a misconception that tankless water heaters save energy, because as we talked about with refrigerators, same with hot water heaters, is the insulation has gotten so good over the years that even though you heat the water and it sits there, it'll stay warm for days on end. And so there's really no loss. And so the theory that you're heating water that you're not using with a tank water heater, and then switch to a tankless, you're going to save energy. That's not necessarily true. So tankless water heaters do have their place. Where I do recommend them is if you're designing a new home and you can have one in each room. That's why they use them so much in Europe and in Asia. But in this country, typically homes are designed for a water heater with a tank. So that's not going to really save you much by going tankless. So the heat pump water heater is a new technology. It uses electricity. However, rather than just using a heating element, it uses an air conditioner in reverse, which we refer to as a heat pump, which basically collects the heat out of the air and puts it into your water. And so it compared to a gas water heater, uses a lot less energy. And they're available at Lowe's and Home Depot, so it's become mainstream technology, and the utilities typically have rebates for them. I have one in my house, and it works great. It uses just a 30 amp breaker, and my gas bill has been as low as $3 a month.
No way. So it's using the energy, instead of using the energy to heat the water, it's using the energy to run the heat pump, and the heat pump is like you said, drawing the heat out of the air to push it onto the water. Is that right?
Exactly. And so it's electric, but it's, a typical electric hot water heater will use a lot of energy and be very expensive, because electricity is actually more expensive than gas. And so with a gas water heater, we don't have a huge gas bill for heating water. If we convert it to just a plain electric water heater, our electric bill would go through the roof.
Yeah.
However, this is electric, but the only electricity is used for the pump, which is cooling down your garage but heating up your water. So it's similar to solar, where you're actually getting free energy.
So if someone does have a gas water heater, you're saying that the savings is so good they should switch it to this electrical one, as long as it's the heat pump one, and they're going to save money on their gas bill as well?
They will. Now it depends what tier they're in, and with SDG the rates kind of vary and so forth. And also depends, if you want to be environmentally conscious, then you definitely want to do this, even if it did cost a little bit more money, probably not a lot. But a lot of places, for example, in Berkeley, California, they're looking at banning natural gas altogether because of fracking. So there's a trend in Europe as well as in the US to get away from natural gas. Now, unfortunately, natural gas is a fairly inexpensive form of energy. And so there's not always a great savings, but this is the next step as far as converting to all electric, because really the holy grail of energy as far as a residential home is to have all solar, all electric.
Right.
And that's where I'm headed, where my cars are all electric. So we have 3 electric cars.
Mhm.
We have everything electric except for the furnace at this point. And so the goal is to just have solar to power both the cars and the house and have no energy bills at all.
Right. And that's called net zero. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's amazing. Certainly, if someone is looking into a solar system, then they're going to want to switch all of their things that are gas over to electric. Are there any other appliances that have kind of new technology that people should be paying attention to that are more energy saving?
That's really the only one. And unfortunately, for example, like a clothes dryer,
Mhm.
so I don't recommend necessarily, for example, with a clothes dryer, there's really no new technology for that. So other than hanging your clothes outside,
Mhm.
and using that free sun energy, a clothes dryer, for example, doesn't have that kind of. So I, hesitated to go with the water heater until the technology came along. But there's really nothing new for the clothes dryer. So unfortunately, my clothes dryer does use a lot of electricity. So
Okay.
that's not anything you want to quickly switch over to like this water heater.
Yeah. So what about, I know you mentioned the Energy Star appliances. So Energy Star's been out for a while. So what if someone has a, 15 or 20-year-old Energy Star appliance? The Energy Star now is still going to be way more efficient, but
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's no reason to replace an Energy Star appliance until it's, at the end of the life. So if it's Energy Star, then you're good, regardless of when it was. I know TVs are like that because
hmm.
remember the old plasma TVs, for example, you can feel the heat coming off them. That tells you that it's using a lot of electricity. But an Energy Star, you won't feel that heat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Okay, so then I know that you had said, so the first step, if someone's looking into getting a solar system, is that they should go around and try to reduce their energy consumption, because otherwise they might be getting a solar system that's more than what they need, or,
Exactly. So there's a misconception that, oh, once I get solar, I can use unlimited amount of electricity.
uh,
But that's not the case. The solar will put out a fixed amount of electricity, which we can pretty well project, although there's variations in the weather. For the most part, we can project how much production the solar is going to do. Now, solar is sold by the watt. And so you can say by the watt or by the panel or however you want to put it. If you buy a system, for example, that's 3,000 watts and the cost is $10,000, and then you say, well, I want a bigger system, I want double the size, well, then the cost is going to be almost double. So
mhm.
that's why it's important to reduce your consumption, because if you can reduce your consumption by 25%, now you've reduced how much you need to spend on solar by 25%. Although even if you don't get solar, it's just a no-brainer to go with these energy efficiency measures
Yeah,
first, but it just so happens that people don't talk to me until they're interested in solar.
yeah,
But everybody should be doing, energy conservation and reducing their consumption in order to save money.
yeah. Well, and you might be limited on the space you have for the solar panels. They take up a lot of room, and say you don't have room on the ground, and you're limited by how big your roof is. Um,
Good point. That's very common. People will say, well, gee, I have a 6,000 square foot house, and why can't I put all these panels on the roof? I say, well, this is facing the wrong direction. This one's shaded.
mhm.
This is limited. We have to do, fire for the fire department. We have to have 3-foot setbacks on the roof and so forth. So that's a good point. Like I tell people, they say, okay, I want to get rid of my entire consumption. I say, well, you either run out of money or roof space. And so they may have unlimited roof space, but if people don't want to spend $50,000 on solar to get rid of all their consumption, or they could say, well, I want to, fill it up. But as you mentioned, Sheila, they might have limited roof space. So that's where consumption becomes a necessity.
Right.
And we look at
So
a two-pronged approach.
okay, so we just went through all the items that they have to do to kind of reduce their consumption. So now someone comes to you and says, okay, I've reduced all my consumption and here's my bill. You can see how much I'm using every month. What is the next step as far as learning about solar and deciding what you want to put on your home?
Sure. So the first question obviously is about price. And
Mhm.
so as we mentioned, price has to do with, how much you want to, how many solar panels you want or need. So first of all, we don't have to eliminate the entire bill. Typically, we eliminate 70 to 90% of the bill because of cost or roof space. And so once we look at the consumption, we can figure out how many kilowatt hours per year we're going to want to generate and what that'll do. So typically I give customers 3 different options to show them, okay, if we get a system that's 6,000 watts, it'll get rid of 70% of your bill, 7,000 watts, 80%, and so forth. And when we look at the cost, it's per watt, and typically in the market, the price is about $3.20 per kilowatt of solar. And then there's fortunately in the fall, they extended the tax credit. So whatever you spend on solar, there's a 26% federal tax credit that you get back the following year for that. And so if we, for example, put in a system that was about a 3 kilowatt system, about $10,000, and then it'll be about, the net price will be about $7,300 or something like that. And then as far as savings goes, and I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, I know, but I can review that in a minute. But basically, whatever the net amount you spend on solar, so if you spent $10,000 on solar, you would expect to save about 15% of that per year. So that would be about a $1,500 savings per year. And that's where we get about a 5 to 7 year return on your investment, although the solar panels will last for 40 or 50 years. But typically 5 to 7 years, you would have recovered the amount you spent on solar. And going back to the beginning, with lighting, remember that you can get a 1 year return on your investment, which is 100, you can double your money in 1 year. So that's why consumption is first.
So I wonder if it's 5 to 7 years before you really get a return on your investment, do you suggest that people, if they're selling their home and they think, oh, I should put a solar system on and I'll lease it or something so I can say I have solar, what are your comments about that?
Yeah, so what I tell people is if you know you're going to move in, 5 years or less, then you really want to think about solar. If, there's the argument that it adds to the value of the house. And I would say that the misconception is that the 5 to 7 years could be misleading because that's when you would have recovered all your costs. But you are saving right off the bat for your first year. Again, if you spend $10,000, you're saving $15,000 per year. So in 4 years, you've already at $6,000 and you recovered a large portion of that. And so a lot of people waited, but then it turned out they didn't move, in the 5 to 7 years, or it took 8 or 9 years to move. And so I have customers that have, called me 3 or 4 years later, that I've talked to. So I've been doing this for, 13 years when solar first started. And it's interesting how people will put it off. And I understand that, either financially or you have other projects or you're not sure, you think the technology is getting better. But typically, unless you know for sure you're going to move in 5 years, then it does make sense to get solar, or at least evaluate it, because a lot of people don't do that because a lot of people don't like solar salespeople or any home improvement salespeople, so they put it off. But it can be as easy as an email quote. Once we look at your consumption, look at an aerial photo of your house, then it's very simple to just give you the data so you have it, and then you can take your time and see if it makes sense to consider or not.
Yeah, but there's a big difference probably in not all solar panels are the same. There's several different brands now. And so how do you know which ones are the good quality ones and which ones are not? Like, what did you look for?
That's a good question. And actually, it's a lot simpler than that. There are hundreds of different brands, and I've installed all kinds of them, but it's really somewhat of a commodity, believe it or not. And so solar panels, so there are, some companies that have gone out of business and so forth, and there's kind of technologies that have come and gone. But for the most part, in the 13 years I've been doing solar, there really hasn't been any changes, and there really hasn't been any products that are inferior. Now, they all have 25-year warranties, and they're backed by companies like, LG, Panasonic, and so forth. They're not companies that are fly-by-night, and they wouldn't give you a 25-year warranty if they thought in 10 or 15 years they were going to have to replace, millions of dollars of solar panels. So they are somewhat of a commodity. Other than there's ones, like I said, that are the lowest cost Chinese ones or whatever. But for the most part, solar panels are pretty much a commodity.
Okay. Do you have your favorite brands you want to share?
So LG is always, a favorite just because it's a household name. And then the one that I use the most though is REC, which isn't a household name, but it's one of the largest solar panel producers in the world. And it's a Norwegian company traded on the Oslo Exchange. But again, over the years, there's so many different brands and none of them are bad. It's just A lot of it depends on availability, whether we need high efficiency, because if we're limited on roof space, we might spend, like LG is a high efficiency panel.
Mhm.
So if we're limited on a roof space, we want to get a panel with the most watts
Right.
per panel, which will cost a little bit more.
Mhm.
So those are the two I typically use, but a lot of companies buy containers of panels, and then whichever one they bought and got a good deal on, that's the best one available. It's kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they'll get sold at, but again, it's pretty much a commodity. In my 13 years, I've never ever had a panel go out,
Really?
other than, yeah, so I've installed tens of thousands of panels. Now there is a caveat. I've had 3 panels go out, but they were all explainable. One was an old system that we moved for a customer, which was years. It was a years old system. Another one had palm leaves sitting on it, which, because of shading directly on the panel, caused it. And the third one was someone had bought panels that were kind of demo panels or whatever. The company used them for testing, and he had a friend that worked there, and I installed them for him. So bottom line is, no entire systems that I've sold for a customer has a panel ever gone out.
That's awesome.
So
So I wonder, what are your feelings about, but because I think as a realtor, if someone has a solar panel system, it's way better to sell if it's owned by the seller. If it's leased, it causes all these other issues when you go to transfer the lease and all that. And buyers don't want to have to take on somebody's lease. They think, I didn't pick this system out, what? So it's much better if it's owned, but I'm interested in what your feeling is on that.
yeah, I have a pretty strong feelings, because I've actually been involved in, well, they call it PPAs or leasing. It's the same thing, but a power purchase agreement. I was actually involved in the very first ones, which was from a company called Sunrun when they very first started, and the company I was working for partnered with them. So I saw this concept coming
Mhm.
from actually the inventor of that concept,
Mm.
which is now is the CEO of Sunrun. And so basically there's a sales pitch, kind of like with everything, there's a sales pitch to go along with it. And what their concept is, well, you don't want to own the panels. It's really a headache to maintain it. We'll maintain it for you. So that's the sales pitch. And they teach you that to go in and tell people that, you know what, the old way is to own it, but you don't want to own it because you have to maintain it. But guess what? Just like I said, there's no maintenance. That's the funny thing. They don't tell you that. It's like, you don't
Yeah,
want to go on your roof and be cleaning panels and this and that. We'll do it all for you.
but they
But
don't come out and clean your panels, do they?
they say they will if there's problems, but there's never any problems, so they never
Right.
clean them. And so yeah, so leasing to me never makes sense. I don't want to say it's a scam or a fraud or anything, because actually, I don't want to say it never makes sense either. There are cases where it makes sense, and I'll give you an example. So first of all, if you're going to buy solar panel or going to install solar panels, you might as well get all the return on investment, not banks. And that's what leases are. Is they're large banks, Morgan Stanley, US Bank, they'll spend 20 or $30 million at a time, give it to a solar installer like Tesla or Sunrun or Suniva or whoever, and they will install a bunch of solar panels. The bank owns it, and the bank's the one making all the money, and they're basically giving the owner the crumbs, which is a little bit of savings. And
Mhm.
it's very misleading, because they'll tell you what the savings are based on utility rate hikes, but the utility rate hikes may not be what they're saying. And so you could theoretically go upside down on your solar
Hmm.
and be paying them more than you would be paying the utility over the 20-year lease.
Wow.
So there are other ways to finance it. You can actually go through a local credit union, go to home equity line. You can actually I've had a customer that refinanced their cars
Mhm.
in order at a 1.99% interest rate. So I recommend financing of a 5 to 7 year term for solar, because
Mhm.
that's the payback,
Yeah.
or a home equity line, because you can normally get that at low interest.
Yeah. That's very valuable. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, okay, so then we talked about the brands. We talked about what you need to do beforehand. Is there anything that we're missing if someone's interested in solar that they need to know about?
We did mention a little bit about the warranty and why the panels last so long. And
Mhm.
so the warranties are typically 25 years for the panel,
Mhm.
and for the panels, and it could be typically 10 years for the installation, as well as roof leaks, because a lot of people are concerned about roof leaks. It's not very common to have roof leaks. It's a big concern, but it's not very common. But a lot of people don't want to get solar because they're afraid of roof leaks. But if
Mhm.
they're installed properly, which they normally are by most companies, there's not going to be roof leaks. And then the other thing is, how can they last 25 years? Well, they're made up of glass, aluminum, and silicon. And all three of those things, for example, if you go into a boat harbor, you'll see, boats are aluminum mass, everything's aluminum, and they've been there for 40 or 50 years. You look at glass, you can find a, car from the 1920s, and the glass could have been out in the sun is fine. So that's the reason they can last so long. But the inverters have other components in them that they can wear out, electronic or electrical components like capacitors, resistors, which we call discrete, which are non-silicon based components. So that's why there's a 10-year life on the inverters. But yet the panels are silicon, and silicon has an infinite life. That's why, for example, LED lights theoretically have an infinite life unless they overheat. So resistors, transistors, computer chips, they have an infinite life. They don't wear out. Now they could get hot, or they could have been defective or whatever, and then through heat and time they could break, but otherwise they'll go forever. So that's really a big thing to know about as far as solar goes. It's not being oversold if someone tells you the panels will last 40 or 50 years, because they will.
Okay, that's awesome. One thing we didn't talk about is batteries. So what is your feeling on a battery system? Is it necessary, or are there times when it's necessary, or do you like them?
Good question. So batteries, in my opinion, I would wait. I don't think they're necessary. There's two reasons why people typically are sold batteries for their homes. One is to help with SDG rates, because you can store power during the daytime from your solar and then use it at nighttime. And so that, I call it, gaming the system and get better rates from SDG&E. However, the savings is typically only in the hundreds of dollars. So that doesn't make sense to invest $10,000 or more in batteries to save a few $100s a year. But it's a good sales pitch, because I get that. Sometimes daily. Some weeks I'll have 3 or 4 calls from customers where I've installed solar, and they're asking me about batteries. In fact, I just got one the other day of someone that had solar, and then they're building a new house, or they're renting a house, and he said, "I can't believe it. There's batteries in this house, and I'm negative on my SDG bill." And he thinks the batteries are saving him money, but in reality, that's not the case. So people see this battery as this magic thing that's going to save tons of money, but it doesn't necessarily save money. Now, the second reason people would buy batteries is for backup if the power goes out. The problem with that is the amount of power that's stored is limited, and unless you have good sun, unless it's in the summer and it's not cloudy, your solar may or may not be enough to recharge those batteries to keep things going. And you can only put some appliances on the batteries. You can't put your entire house on a battery. So at this point, those are the two reasons why people buy batteries, to save money, which I would look at that very, very carefully. A lot of times they bundle it in with solar. So you see the total savings of the solar with the batteries, and that looks good. But it would be much better if they stripped out the batteries, but they won't show you that.
Yeah, well, because each battery, like you said, is $10,000, but you're saying that if all you can run on that battery when the power's out is just a fridge, or
Exactly.
how many watts do you get on the battery in general?
Yeah, so a battery, so for example, a Tesla Powerwall is about 13 kilowatt hours, but a typical home might use 40 to 60 kilowatt hours. So that's why you need 2 of them, but you typically can't get more than 2 because of permitting. So that's why things are, changing over time. And so and then just to put it in comparison, a typical electric vehicle like a Chevy Bolt or even a Tesla Model 3 has a 60 kilowatt hour battery. And so the Tesla Powerwall is only 13 kilowatts.
Oh, that's
and
not
so,
even. Okay.
Yeah. So for example, in my garage, I have 3 electric cars, and I've got, I think probably 100 kilowatt hours of battery just sitting there. So I think the future is using your electric car to power your house, in a power outage. So that's kind of
That's exciting. Wow. Yeah. But people now, they can get a generator if they want to have backup.
Yes, yeah, good point. So we did talk about that. So and actually I made a list here. So if you, for example, if you think of what happens, so if we set aside the energy savings, which is minimal for batteries, or as far as SUV savings, say, okay, batteries for backup. Well, what do we do? What do we need when there's a backup? So if you think about it, you have to have a whole plan for what happens when the power goes out, not necessarily, oh, I'll just have a battery and everything will be fine. Because you have to think about things like food and water, for example, right? But at the same time, what you need to do is just go through and say, okay, I need lighting. So you need food, water, lighting, internet. You need your garage door to be opened. You need your computers and cell phones charged, and you need to be able to cook, right? So what I recommend doing, and what I do myself, is just go through each one of those things and figure out the best way to do it. And you don't need to call Elon Musk and buy a battery in order to figure that out. So for example, you could just have a little LED camp lantern, a few flashlights and a few candles, and guess what? You've got lighting. It's not rocket science. And then, for example, so there's your lighting. For the internet, you can get just a little battery for $100 or $200 of, a computer backup battery that just sits on the floor like the size of a desktop computer, and that'll run all those small devices for a couple of days. And you can even go one step further than that, which is what I do, is you can get a little inverter for less than $100, and you can actually plug it on to, connect it to your battery of your car, or plug it in a cigarette lighter and use your car battery to charge your phone and cell phone, and then just just start your car every once in a while to make sure you don't kill the battery if you don't have an electric vehicle like mine, which has unlimited. The other thing is garage door openers. Now they're required to have batteries in them.
Okay.
So
So
even
that
though
when
the
the
power
power
goes
goes
out,
out, you can still open your garage door. Yeah.
exactly. So because of the fire codes and so forth, they require, so that will take care of your garage door opener. And your refrigerator, as you mentioned, Sheila, you can get a portable generator, or just leave your refrigerator closed for 24 hours or whatever. But if you're in a prone to and concerned about days on end of power being out, then a portable generator for a few $100s, and you can make sure your refrigerator stays.
Well, so Van, I'm curious, if you were one of those people that just said, okay, still, I just want a battery because I want to be able to turn on a bunch of stuff, and they got a system or a generator or something so that they can have more of the lights on and for their refrigerator to be running. How do you hook up the certain things that you want to be running on the battery or the generator? Because if you have a built-in fridge already, I mean, how do you can't plug that in, it's up plugged into your house. Or do you have to plan for that when you're building?
Good question. Exactly. So if you decide to get batteries, for example, or even a small generator, and this is where we lose a lot of customers. They say, oh, I want a battery. Okay, first thing you do is you tell me what appliances you want on that battery. So Sheila, you're exactly hit the nail on the head as far as what the first step is what you have to do is go through and figure out what you want to use. Exactly. So for example, an electric oven, that's out of the question. Air conditioners, that's out of the question. They're going to draw too much power for any batteries unless you have a really big generator. And so what we call that is a critical loads subpanel. So what we would do, sounds technical, but basically what we do is, if you've ever seen the inside of a main panel, it's got several circuit breakers. And what would need to be done would be to decide which breakers are critical, and at the same time, they're not drawing tons of power. And so you would take the ones for the lighting that you want. You'd say, I need the one for the refrigerator. And you would take those breakers and you'd move those circuits into a sub panel, which is basically a smaller panel, which would be next to that one. And then when the power goes out, then you would disconnect from SDG&E. And so it's called a transfer switch, because you can't have both going. Because if you didn't disconnect from SDG&E, you'd be trying to power your entire neighborhood with your generator or battery.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. So this is something that you can do as a retrofit. Like, you don't have to be building a brand new house to have the sub panel put in that's for the emergency items.
Exactly. So whether you're going to use batteries or a generator, the first step is to get a critical load sub panel. So what a lot of my customers, I'm recommending they do, and a lot of them have done that and been so happy they do it, is just, so the sub panel itself is about $200, and then you get an electrician to move the circuits over. And so what what you do as a first step, again, you get those loads, you get them into a sub panel, and then you can just plug a generator or a battery into that sub panel.
Mhm.
And when the
Oh,
power goes
okay.
out, you just manually switch over. And that's a low cost way to be able to run your refrigerator, some lighting, your computer, and so forth. And you can get generators now that are small and quiet.
Mhm.
And you combination, maybe you run the battery overnight, you use a small battery overnight, just a portable battery you can buy that's on a little cart.
Yeah. Okay, that's good because if you live, I mean, we're in Southern California, so sometimes in October they have rolling, to prevent fires, they have those, they just turn off the power. And, if you live in different parts of the country, maybe during the winter and stuff, you lose power from storms and things. So at least just so that all of the food in your refrigerator doesn't go bad, it seems like it would be a good idea to have some sort of backup plan.
Absolutely. And yeah, because we're seeing more and more of that. And a couple of years ago, there were homes where I've installed solar, and their power was out for 2 or 3 days. And I think maybe SDG was just trying to prove a point, because it hadn't happened this year. It was only out for maybe one day, but they just wanted to
Yeah,
see everyone suffer or something. But
I
in any
hope
case,
not. Oh my
no,
gosh.
I'm just being facetious. But in any case, you're right. That comes along. And so ideally, that I guess my point, even though I work in solar and batteries kind of relate to solar and it's a great thing, just be aware that there's drawbacks to that. And again, Elon Musk, and Tesla have made everybody think that they need a battery in their house. But ultimately, in those other states, like if you're off the grid, or in Florida, for example, where their power is out all the time because of weather and so forth, really, if you had a house with solar and batteries, there's really no way to survive and live a normal situation other than being like you're on a boat or a motorhome, unless you also have a generator.
Okay. Huh. All
So
right.
then the question is, how valuable, do I really
Yeah.
need a battery, or do I just go straight to a generator at this point?
Can you use your car batteries to run your house if you've already got those big car batteries?
Absolutely. So that's where so you can buy an inverter
Hmm.
in different sizes, and the cost goes up as the wattages go up. But you can buy, even at Harbor Freight or on Amazon or whatever, you start out with a 200-watt generator. To run a refrigerator, you probably need 500 or 1,000 watts, but still, it's only maybe $200 or $300 for a 1,000-watt generator, and you can clamp it onto the battery of your car. And again, some people don't want to go to that
Yeah.
level, but the smaller ones you can plug in your cigarette lighter, and you can use that to charge phones. So you're ultimately using your car
But why
battery.
can't you use if you buy a Tesla, don't you get a big battery that goes on the wall? Couldn't you just use that big battery on the wall?
So the battery on the wall, that's the batteries we're talking about
Oh,
as far as the home batteries.
okay.
So the Tesla car has a battery in the car, and then it has a little
Okay.
unit on the wall to charge it. But yes, you can leave, and this is something I've been experimenting with, but you can, so an electric car, for example, during the summer, I leave my electric car on and the air conditioning working. So if I go shopping,
Oh,
I literally lock the car and the car is running, but it's not really running, right?
yeah.
But so that's great. Like if you buy groceries or you have pets or whatever, you could leave the
Oh
air
my
conditioner
God.
on.
Yeah.
And so an electric car, is amazing. Um, there's so many things, so many benefits about it. But then at the same time, if you left it on, it also has a 12-volt battery in the front, just like a regular car, which they use for, auxiliary battery, which runs things in the car. So you can plug an inverter into that,
Mhm.
and yes, you are using your 60 kilowatt hour car battery, because that battery is used to charge your 12-volt battery.
Mhm.
So with this invert, going back to, I know we're talking about a lot of different technology, but going back to that Harbor Freight or Amazon inverter that clamps onto your 12-volt battery in your car, if you have a gas car, you can use that, but you have to be aware that that battery is going to die eventually. And so you want to run your car every once in a while. If you have an electric car, you don't have to worry about that, because your huge battery in your car is
Mhm.
going to recharge that 12-volt battery, which in turn will run your refrigerator.
Okay, I see it. Because the bigger battery is in the car, not on the wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
underneath the seats,
Yeah.
typically in a Tesla or most cars, it's underneath the seats in the car.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. We've just learned so much. So, how if people have more questions, do you have a website or anything where people can get a hold of you?
Sure. The website is Delta, like the airline, solarelectric.com, all one
Okay.
word. So
Okay.
Delta solarelectric.com. I don't use the website much. I'm more of a face-to-face person and telephone person,
Mhm.
but the phone number is on the website.
Okay. Awesome.
And my email is just Van, my first name, VAN, at deltasolarelectric.com. So I'm happy to answer any questions about any topic related to energy.
Yeah, and you also are in the southern San Diego area, so if anybody's looking for solar in this area, they should definitely call you.
Yes.
Yes, I love it. I love how honest you are and how you actually care more about the client saving money than you do about the commissions in the in the solar panel system that they get, because not everyone's like that. So I appreciate that about you.
Great. Yeah, my wife says that. She says, you love saving money. She said, even if it's someone else's money you're saving.
Well, yeah, because when you do right by the client, you put service first, then they refer you, and it's better business that way, anyways.
Yeah, I've seen so many times where people have shown me quotes of customers just trying to sell them huge systems that they didn't need, and they even put solar panels on north roofs. They get very little production.
Yeah, wow. Okay, well, thank you so much, Van. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Sheila.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you learned something new that will inspire you to think about your branding and how you can market yourself a little differently. If you enjoyed this episode, then you're going to love what I have for you, because you don't need to wait to go get extra certifications or to grow and expand your network to get started attracting those new leads right now. You can simply begin by talking about wellness real estate trends and what you've learned on this podcast with others. I mean, this is pretty interesting stuff that no one has heard about, and I have all the tools that can make it even easier for you. Wellness Real Estate Magazine is a brand new wellness lifestyle magazine, and it's the only magazine that brings health and home together. We educate readers on industry trends and how to create a healthier home environment, written by industry experts around the country. And we have 3 covers to choose from: Wellness RE, Healthy Home, and Wellness at Home, so you can easily find one that aligns with your unique brand and messaging. These magazines are the perfect done-for-you tools that help you not only stay top of mind, but they educate and engage your audience, which positions you as an industry expert. Differentiate yourself and grow your brand the easy way. Learn more at healthyhomemedia.com.